It's not right, Abhishek, to carry weapons into our community. They don't belong with us. But Milani, I feel more comfortable with the weapon in my hand. I was stunned by his response. What do you mean? Confusion crossed his face. And I regret that I had criticized him, knowing how attached he was to his bow and arrow. I don't know what I mean, Milani, he replied quietly. I just wish that I could get proper training so I might one day become a skilled archer and protect you and the community, all from Dwarka. We are not Kshatriya, warrior and governor class Abhishek. We are a community of dancers and performers. Do you want to leave us? Aren't we your family? Of course you are, he hurried to console me. Perhaps it's because I feel so keenly that the need to protect you and Amma. You are my family, Malani. I have nobody else. I never raised this subject again with him, although my father began to take a tougher stance. You may shoot arrows when we are in private, he cautioned, but no one in the community should come to know. If they do, it will create much disturbance among us. You must find your place here, if not in dance itself, then in the organization of performance, as I have done. My mother, who we called Amma, loved to tell stories of her growing up in years of Vitrava. Once I asked her if she ever seen Rukmini Deva during that time. That smiling, she nodded her head, exchanging eager glances. Abhishek and I urged her to tell us the story. Much like Sri Krishna. That is one reason why they said they are a perfect match. Only she didn't have a freedom for Sri Krishna to wander the forests of Vrindavan with his friends and encouraged in many playful activities. Our Rajakumar was kept under careful watch, confined to the palace, but she would even sneak out, disguised as a village girl, so she could mingle with the townspeople. She loved to come and watch the dance performances. One day during the performance, I caught her sight in the audience. I don't know how I recognized her, but I heard that she was not only very beautiful, but there was a glow about her and a joy emanated from her. I also heard that she often sneaked away from the palace disguised as a village girl, so when I saw such a girl, about the same age as me, sitting alone in the audience, and then saw palace guards escorting the place to search for someone, I somehow knew it was her and immediately felt like I need to protect her. I was about 14 years old at the time and didn't have much part of the performance. I had just finished my small role and I saw her seated off to the side, observed in the performance as obviously the guards who were searching for her. Without thinking, I ran, took hold of her hand and whispered, Rajakumari, the palace guards are here. Come with me and I will help you escape through the hidden path. Amma paused and then looked at us. Bemused expression exclaimed, I don't know how I had the courage to do this, to take our Rajakumari by hand and lead her away. But I did it without thinking. There was no time to consider how properly to approach her. She didn't hesitate and immediately followed me as I led her around the backstage along a narrow path well hidden by brush. Amma smiled as she remembered that incident. Then I led her back through the streets of the place where she could enter the palace discreetly. I had to point the way out. I folded my hands in Framum to begin to apologize for the way I approached her. When she stopped me and thanked me, for a moment she stood looking intently with me, and then she asked my name. Drashma, I replied. Drashman, she repeated softly, and I said, I remember you, and one day I will repay your kindness. Before I told her that it was not necessary, she was gone. My mother ended her story, and Abhishek and I looked at her in amazement. We didn't know that Rukmini Deva had such courage to disobey her father and her brother Rukmin, who were known to have been very strict with her. That was not the only time a Rajakumari escaped from our palace, confidently, my mother continued. I am told as a young girl only around 7 years of age that she would unlock the palace gate and slip away to the neighboring forest where she would secretly meet Sri Krishna. Then, as she got older, she took an interest in crafts and work of artisans. She would disguise herself and visit them, no matter how many guards were placed at the door of her quarters, no matter how many locks were employed. She always found a way to escape. Rukmini could not be confined, and I admired her so much for this. How I wish I could be like her and have the courage to go against all those restrictions. Did you ever meet her again? I asked, for some reason pleased to learn Rukmini Deva's disobedient childhood. She nodded, twice more. The second time was in the market a year later. I have gone to buy some earrings for the performance when I saw her in a little gem stall, picking up and commenting on the different stones. I drew closer to hear what she was saying. She was again disputed as a simple village girl, and the shopkeeper kept asking how she knew about the gems. She could only smile and reply, "There's so many things I know." As I listened to her describe qualities of each gem, I barely noticed the sound of several palace guards approaching. But then when I looked up and saw them rushing, grabbing her hand, I explained with anxious voice, "Rukmini, guards are here. Come with me." She looked up, saw them, and recognized me, allowed me to lead her to the palace behind the stalls where we couldn't be seen. When we were hiding, she smiled and said, "Darshana, you saved me once more. I will surely do the same to you one day." As the guards were roaming through the market, checking every stall, she had made a motion to leave. "Rajakumari, they are still here," I whispered, concerned that they would be discovered. "No matter," she replied as a slight laugh. "It is the best through the I disappear from here." And those words, in fact, she did disappear. I looked all over, but she was nowhere to be found. Amma stopped speaking as I looked at her questioningly. "How could that be, Amma? Nobody can disappear." My doubtful daughter may not believe it, but then that's what I saw with my own eyes. I believe she is far more than a Rajakumari and has that power. "Amma, what does she mean she would save you one day?" I asked curiously. "I don't know. My mother must. I'm also perplexed by that, but we will see what the future holds." She continued. "I saw her the third time at a performance on the well-known singer in a village outside of Kandapuri, the capital of Vidra Kingdom. It was festival time, and we had been seen performing in the village the night before. They stayed up to hear the singer. I was with my parents, sitting there absorbed in these songs when I heard the most amazing music, heavenly sounds coming out of the air for celestial musicians. My mother paused with a half smile and closed her eyes as if she could hear that music again. We quietly sat there for a few moments while it was thus observed. Then I prodded her to continue. Children truly, it was the sound of celestial musicians, the Gangadevas, who has come in the honor to present a great being. As the music filled the air, I looked around for where the music was coming up, and there she was, seated off herself, dressed in a arti in a village girl, so she would not be noticed. But there was no mistaking, she was a Rajkumari. The Gandhars have come to celebrate, to sing for her. For some reason, which even until this day I do not understand, I was able to hear the celestial music. In a daze, I rose and began to make my way to her. I felt really protective to her and concerned that some others might notice her, and also worried about the palace guards might come. My mother, noticing that I had left my seat, hurriedly came and caught me by the hand. I explained to my mother I needed to go see someone, but when I turned where Rajkumari was seated, she was gone. This confirmed me she was not an ordinary person. Love for her hand already began to sprout in my heart. By this experience, the hearing of the celestial music gave me a new appreciation for her. To this day, I don't know if anyone else heard the music. Why she allowed me to hear it, I don't know. It was a great gift, and I never forgotten those sounds that emanated from the air around her. Turning to me, Amma said, "When you were a baby, and even when you were in my womb, I used to sing you one of those songs that the musicians sang in evening in a village outside of Kandapuri. It was a very popular song at that time. I never want to forget it, as it reminded me of the celestial music I have heard. I sang it often to you both. It made me feel like our Rajakumari was close and she was blessing you." I thought at that moment and then replied, "I remember a tune you used to sing me at night, although I don't remember the words." My mother began to hum the tune and I smiled. "Yes, that's it," I recalled fondly. "You used to sing me that at night and I drifted to sleep." "But, Amma, there's no such thing as the Gandharva, is there?" I could not hide my doubts. "Of course there is," she smiled. "It's from that we humans have learned to sing and dance and play instruments. Everything we have known we learned from them." Later that night, I was alone with Abhishek in a room we shared. I commented on how Amma might be exaggerating in her stories. "You don't believe it all, do you?" I asked him. He was going to deprecate as I will. Nodding, he smiled. "I do. Whatever Amma says, I believe it's true." Some months later, I was seated with my mother, and suddenly a conversation again turned to Rukmini Deva. "I feel like there's a special reason why Rukmini gave birth to Vida," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked curiously. "It was the birthplace of a mother of Maharaja Drasatru, Sri Ram's grandmother, who adored him. When Sri Ram and Sita Deva went to the exile and were traveling to the south, they stopped at Hyderabad to pay respects to her. It was still going, the gateway to the south, and meeting place of northern kingdoms and southern tribes. Ram and Sita prayed by the river Vandradeva, which was sent by Deva Vandrama, the Devi, goddess, who was great devotee of Sita. After they prayed on the side of the river, the Deva appeared and gave them a gift to Sri Ram, divine Shakti Astra, the weapon which he had killed Ravana. The weapon contrasted a great Shakti force that combined energy of Mahadevas, Parvati, Sarvati, and Mahalakshmi. Vidraba was also birthplace of sage Lamprada, who was dear to Sita. My mother assumed a thoughtful look as she continued. "I've heard about that our Rajakumari as a young girl often went to the Veena river to pay respects to the Devi there. Thousands of years after the incident with Sri Rama and Sita Ma, she still went to that river to thank the Devi for the gift of Shakti Astra. She has not forgotten, and she was so fond of that river, which flows into the Godrava, who we all know was a daughter to like Sita Deva. So I think there was some significance as why she took birth to Vidarbha. Her voice grew quiet, as it was both clear that Abhishek and me, and that our mother had a deep reverence and worship attitude, but Tianjio's worshipped attitude toward the one she often called a Rajkumari. But it was the attitude that I didn't share. I greatly admired the beautiful talent of Rajkumar, Rukmini, who elevated the arts of Dwarka and had the reputation of being the most gracious and caring of all the people. I respected her for the independent and courageous, but I didn't believe any mysterious power. While I loved my mother's stories, I doubted if they had a fact happened just as she described. She was a dancer, an artist, and a creator of imaginative tales. I accepted when she told us the mixture of truth and fantasy. Amma, how do you know all this? I asked as she finished one of her narrations. I listen to what people say. I try to understand the deeper meaning behind the outdoor actions. When I was a little girl in Vidarbha, this was a talk among the people. We all loved her Raja Kumari, and we were eager to share stories. Many of us understood that she was not an ordinary person. Was it out of love and for her community left Vidarbha when she got married? I asked, waiting to return a more mudden subject. Amma nodded. Mahadra's father made the decision. He was such a great administration of a Rajakumari because due to her appreciation to the arts and performance gained respect to the place in the kingdom. Before her, nobody cared much, but her brothers were only interested in military success, expanding their lands, and prosperity. They gave no thought to beauty or well-being of the people. She was the only daughter in the family who early age expressed a love and beauty, an artistic expression in all the manifold forms. It is why they could not keep her from secretly visiting these arts and performers. She wanted the art to be available to everyone, and her visits gave us all such encouragement. I later found out that other people also thought her discontented and were careful not to reveal her presence for fear she would be discovered and punished. When we heard that Sri Krishna and Rajakumari were building a new city of Dwarka, we wanted to be a part of it, so our community moved here. And so did many artists. We wanted Dwarka to known as not the beauty of architects, but also the beauty created by all arts and musicians and dancers. Our Rajakumari helped us realize this. That's why our community is known throughout the and is constantly called to give performances. Inspired by her words, I felt a great blessing to be part of our community. I was determined to work hard and achieve as much as my mother. Little did I realize those innocent days of my childhood would not last long. I heard one more story about Rukmini Deva before my world was turned upside down. My mother was in the courtyard in the back of her home preparing an evening meal. I was by her side helping her, and suddenly she put down a spoon and she was stirring the food, and a large fry turned to me. Malani, there is something I must tell you that I want you to always remember. The serious tone in her voice caused me to pause and set aside what I was doing and drew closer to me. Come, she said, leading me where we could sit. I once told you that our Rajakumari used to meet Sri Krishna in the forest behind the place of Puri when she was a young girl. I heard that story from an old woman's steer my mother knew about Vidarbha. She told my mother that Sri Krishna was the one who found a Rajkumari one day sitting in the stream of the forest behind her palace. He had been searching for her, and the one he had seen was killed by demon Kamsa. She was there then? I asked surprised. She must be only a child. My mother nodded. The seer told my mother that Kamsa was the rebirth of a demon named Kalamani, who Narayana has killed in an earlier age. She said this demon had lurked close to the earth, waiting for the time to be reborn and take his revenge. His anger and quest of power has only grown. Eventually he gave birth again as Kamsa and filled the hatred of Narayana. Kamsa's mother has been associated and has been abused when he was born. So she hated him and cursed him to be killed by a member of his own family. As you know, Sri Krishna was his new friend. That's why Kamsa sought to kill all the children of his sister, because he suspected that one of them would be the cause for his death. After Sri Krishna came of age, his uncle challenged him, and when Sri Krishna finally killed him, he saw a beautiful young girl lift Kamsa's spirit from his body and carry him away to help him release his anger and transfer the demonic energy so he wouldn't take birth again to seek revenge. That child was our Rajkumari, and Sri Krishna, realizing how incarnated, set out to find her. I looked at my mother in disbelief. Amma, she has much been younger than me. How could this be? She was. There was many things about life she would never be able to understand. But Amma, how do you know the story is true? In her great love for Rajakumari, my mother believed all kinds of mystical things about her. The woman steer of Vidarbha has not said it, and there's not true. I trust her implicitly. I did not respond to my mother, and we did not share doubts that filled my mind. Amma continued. I'm telling you this for a reason. There are such people in the world who do terrible things, commit very bad acts. Mahendra was one of them. He may not be as bad as Kamsa, but for me, he's a demon. I want you to promise me that you will stay from him and never alone with him. Always have Abhishek with you, and when you are in his company, I trust Abhishek to protect you. And if you run into any trouble, call upon Rukmini Deva. I believe she's your ultimate protection. No demon is any match for her. Why are you talking about demons? Why are you talking to me about demons? I asked in a fearful voice. Because I may not always be here to protect you, but if you pray to Rukmini Deva, she, along with your brother, will take care. I fully believe that. I didn't respond because I was frightened by her words, especially when she go. She will not always be there to protect me. Where will she go? Always remember that we are from Vidarbha, she continued, and Rukmini will always be your Rajakumari. She has a great appreciation for those of her who followed her here. Never forget that she will respond to your call. My mother's words left me into an uneasy feeling. So she spoke to me. I felt confident. Forgetting that I was still a young child, why was she speaking as she would not always be to me? She was a pillar in my life, the heart of the family. I could not imagine the world without her. Abhishek was my other pillar, the one I would go when my mother wasn't around. As a child, every time I would leave home, even to wander around the community, my mother would send Abhishek with me. She always said that if it was to keep me company, but I knew it was to protect me from one she cherished the most, Mahendra Deva. Whenever he entered our home, I would often see the cast his eyes over my mother. She would always send me off with Abhishek as if to spare the sight of the lewd Gans. Even as a young, I took note of how Amma's face tightened whenever she was his presence without other dancers. One evening, I was alone with Abhishek and asked him, Amma believes Rukmini is a great Devi. Do you believe that, Abhishek? I do believe that she is not an ordinary woman, as Amma has often told us. Amma has spoken so much about her, I wish I could see her once up close. Then I know if she's a Devi. And then I will take you on the next festival, he had replied with a smile. So I waited eagerly to to see the one my mother so adored. Few weeks later, the day has come. The whole city has been marking the festival preparations and our community as well. Mother had some other dancers traveling and performing in one of the nearby villages. Abhishek and I were left with our father. In the first hint of the daybreak, my mother shook me awake. Come quickly here, she nearly pulling me off my sleeping bag. It's not morning yet. Why are you waking me up? Just follow, he insisted and gave me clothes to put on. Obediently, I did as he commanded and followed him out the door to the narrow path, past the open market that was just coming alive, to the seashore, a place I loved but rarely had opportunity to visit. There were not many people there, and most of the city was still asleep. But in the distance, I saw a beautiful decorated ship, adorned with flowers approaching the shore. I knew that would be Rukmini and Sri Krishna. Is that her coming? I asked excitedly. We all know that Sri Krishna is in the early days. He had built a palace on the island just off the shore to keep his wives and children safe from Kamsa's allies, who knew times of revenge of Kamsa's killing. He nodded. I have seen them come before on festivals. They arrive right after dawn to take part of this temple celebration. Let us hide behind those trees. He pointed to a small gathering of coconut trees on the beach. We ran to take cover. We tried to hide our small bodies behind the slim trunk and point out the sand. We were not only children in the idea of the mind. So many others had come to join us, watching behind the tree of the arrival of Sri Krishna and Rukmini. As she reached the dock, I became to take few steps closer. Then Abhishek grabbed my arm and drew it back. We must see. The other children began to make exciting noises, and Abhishek turned to them and held their fingers to his lips. Hush, he cautioned, and some with the children stood there as they wanted to watch Sri Krishna step out of the boat, and then turned to held the sound out to Rukmini, who took it and stepped out of the dock. They walked down the wooden dock onto the stand. She turned with folded hands and looked over the sea, remaining like for a few minutes. What's she doing? I asked Abhishek in a whisper. I'm sure she's expressing her gratitude to see Deva. I've come here before on festival days, each time as the same, praying to the homage of the sea. You have come without me? My voice irritated. I knew I hadn't forced you this time when you were voted. I continued to watch the scene. Every moment seemed so elegant and defined. I was not close enough to see the details of the face either of Sri Krishna and Rukmini. I was struck by the beauty of their colorful clothing and the glow of their ornaments. I have never seen such extravagant garments before. Happened. Rukmini turned to where the children were hiding and stared for a few moments. I saw she noticed us. Taking off her shoes, she waddled into the water. We watched, surprising that the waves swirled around the hem of her clothing with laughter that baffled our ears. She was jokingly dipped her hand into the water and splashed it in Sri Krishna, whose back has been turned to her. With a swift moment, he swung his arm around with the joyful and shout splashed on her. Laughing, they forked into shallow water, spraying one another. Their laughter was infectious, as we were children could not contain ourselves. Exploding with avalanches of giggles, we emerged by the tree, watching the great amusement. This was the play art defined by Sri Krishna and Rukmini Deva. After a while, they came out of the water and walked to the chariot that was waiting to whisk them away. While they were gone, I asked Abhishek how they would go to the temple, drenched in the seawater. Abhishek smiled. I'm sure Sri Krishna will send the wind to dry them off before they enter the temple. Sri Krishna and Rukmini did not like devatas, gods, to me and Abhishek. They seemed like regular people, just like us. One, they were Kashra, and one was more defined appearance. He reflected to the moment and replied, perhaps we'll never know what or who they truly are. But I think you are right. They enjoy the sea as just we are, and they are playful. So even they are devatas, perhaps they are much like us. This was the first of several visits to watch Sri Krishna and Rukmini from a distance on festival days. There's always some playful scene, as she knew their children was watching. Later on, when I thought of those scenes at the seashore, I smiled. I preferred to think about Rukmini was a playful woman who enjoyed creating fun for the children who had come to peer for her, rather than the distant Deva One time my mother returned from the performance in the neighboring kingdoms in a somber mood, which was most unusual for her. In the days that followed, she was more affectionate with me, telling me that no matter what happened, she would always love me. It made me feel uneasy. One evening I happened to enter her room and she felt engrossed in serious conversation with Abhishek. As soon as they saw me, they stopped speaking. Immediately, Abhishek left the room and I saw tears in his eyes. When I asked mother what happened, she didn't answer but rather look away. I knew something was wrong. I went to find Abhishek, but he had gone out and didn't return before I went to sleep that night. Next morning, my mother was gone. Chapter 2. The Steer from Vidarbha. Where is she? Asked my father tearfully. He didn't answer and sat with a gloomy staring in his hands. I pressed again and again. Finally, as in a raised voice, he replied, "She has left us, abandoned us. She has run off with Mohit and never coming out." An angry, plain expression ran across his face. And as she was tried, I was not allowed to let her enter our home again. She brought shame to our family. Don't say that, I cried in disbelief. Amma would never do such thing. Mohit is another dancer in a community, a close friend with my parents. He had never married, and I knew he and my mother were very fond of one another, but I couldn't believe she would ever run away with him, abandoning me and Abhishek. As I sat there stunned, unable to comprehend what was happening with my whole family, Abhishek entered the room, taking me aside. He tried to console me. She had no choice but to leave, Malani. Don't blame her. She couldn't stay any longer. You'll understand when you get older. I cut him off. Why couldn't she stay here? What made her leave her children? With those angry words, I ran outside and hid myself. After spending hours alone trying to come to terms with the new reality, I returned home to help my father prepare the evening meal, knowing that I have to take my mother's place now. I was not left home with my cooking spells, as Mahadevendra has another plan for me. A few weeks after my mom's departure, I was back in the courtyard where her kitchen was located when I heard someone enter the house and speak low tones with my father. I couldn't help but quietly listen in the door. It was Mahendra who has come. My inside froze at his voice. What did you want from me? The only way you and Molly can stay in the community is that you have to give her to me in marriage. Mahendra spoke sternly to my father. You are no use to me, but she can be. With her mother's departure, we are lost a valuable dancer. You must pay the community by giving me Malali. Mahendra, you're old enough to be her father. If you want her, you marry one of your sons. I have to console. That not appalled me. I have seen her talent. I know I can make her a better dancer than Darshana even. Then I want to marry her. You have no shame, my father replied in a breaking voice. She is still a child. You're forcing me into the situation. Either the three of you will be thrown out of this community. Darshana brought such shame upon us. I heard my daughter sigh, and I couldn't hear his words anymore. My whole body trembled in fear. This man was my mother Lohit, who never wanted me to go be alone with her. Was my father really going to contest this in this marriage? It would be better for us to cast in our streets. All right, Mahendra, have your way, but I will make 3 conditions. Malali must become a dancer with a great reputation. She must perform in the palace before you can marry her, and you will not have any relationship with her until marriage. If you do, the contract will be void. Let us a reckless laugh, and suddenly I realized that my father was eating. Feeling nauseous overcome me. I ran to the edge of the courtyard and relieved myself. I felt like a helpless animal being prepared for a sacrifice with no way to escape. Abhishek found me, and seeing a look of distress on my face, he ran inside. I could hear yelling at my father, pleading with Abhishek to calm down. I didn't dare to enter the house. As when Abhishek emerged, he looked at me in a conversation and spoke definitely. I will not let you marry him, Malani, and I will kill him if he touches you. His words helped to calm the emotions strong within me. The next few days were very tense in a home. My father would hardly look at me and Abhishek. Finally, one evening, he told me the object to wait. I'll find a way to get us out of this marriage, but we must act like it's confirmed, so I can think of a place for us to go. We will not be able to stay here. The past weeks, and Mahendra became to have me trained eventually so I can take my mother's place. Outwardly, I avoid all his escape, and onwardly as I resist. I had Unwillingly, I obeyed his dictation, but I resisted. I wanted nothing to do with my mother or role she had played. I blamed her for what has happened, and might assume that she has cut me out of her heart. But when I was determined to do the same, she was not the only one I closed my heart to. Along with my mother, I tried to shut my mind of Rukmini that she loved so much. For anyone or any dear mother was painful reminding from her betrayal. Then one day, Abhishek came also was torn from my life. It was no longer after my mom's departure I nearly drowned in my tears as my father exclaimed that Abhishek was not his or my mother's birth son. We were traveling through a village in Mahundra, and one day we found the little boy crying. He was only 4 and he was lost, my father explained, trying to comfort me. There was an accident with the cherry, and it seemed like his parents were either killed or badly hurt. We couldn't find them. Your mother incident liking to him, and although we searched for the boy's parents, none of us could give us a clue. Finally, we decided to adopt me. That's why he never fit in Malani. This is not from our community. Mahendra finally found his parents in Mahendra. They were Kashtapan, and they given hope of even finding them. We must be happy that he is now in the community which rightfully belongs. Abhishek was taken away so suddenly that we didn't even get a chance to have a proper goodbye. Even though he resisted, no matter how much his men, he was no match for the Venpa Mahendra who was sent to take him back to Mudra. His last words to me, I must never marry Mahendra, even though it meant terrible hardship. I had to get away from his words rang in my mind long after he was gone. Meanwhile, my future marriage with Mahendra hung over me like a force foreboding cloud, which will not move or dissolve. Even though my dad had said he would find a way out, over time his confidence weakened. He began to change my feeling, telling me there was no such bad situation at all. Mahendra was the head of our community, and by marrying him, I would gain status and live more comfortably. But you promised me, Pitaja, father, that we would find a way out of this marriage, I pleaded him one day. Yes, but one time you might reconsider, he sighed. This will never happen, Pitraja, I replied coldly as an attempt to escape my future. I hid myself in dance, although I knew with my success in the area would lead me to the very arms of the man I most hated. After years of intense training, Mahandevra had playing key roles of dances where we traveled to town festivals and also performed in the prominent Kashtra homes in Dwarka. Only my joy accepting the music of my body, allowing to speak beyond the languages could express. Even though I knew I might dance with my nemesis, it was also my greatest love. I could not resist the call. It beyond me with nothing else did. I could even begin to think about how the distance and hateful marriage as long I could bury myself in the rhythms of the dance. The busyness of our performance schedule kept me in the dwelling too much and to hide the pain in my heart, the pain of losing my mother and brother, the two people I held the most dear. Well, my love for my mother turned to angry and conditional. My love for Abhishek remained unchanged. I waited for the day he would come back and rescue me. I felt for sure he would. My father rarely left my side. He wanted to ensure that Mahendra would keep his part in the bargain and not lay his hands on me before the marriage. After Abhishek bargained me, my relationship with me and my father became more distant than it had been. With a little speech and vast and inner spaces between us, our home never recovered the joy that we always kept when my mother and brother were here. But we managed to keep it going as the best we could. The years passed, and one day I was about 16. Life had changed for me. Again, there was a young man in our community, a few years older than me, named Yurita. He was tall, slender dancer, and fine features of a joyful presence, often joking and making humorous comments. He had a playful nature that put us all at ease. At first, he and I often performed together until one day Mahendra no longer allowed it. This, preventing his budding was the attraction between us. Since everyone in the community knew my promised marriage to Mahendra, all the young boys kept distance from me, except Yurita. I wonder why he dared to speak at me with Mahendra's jealous eyes ever upon me, but he did. Locations I gathered with the courage to look up at him. I found myself lost in the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen. For the first time in so many years, I felt tenderness and come into my heart. The attraction has already taken the root when one day I was sitting outside of my home when I saw him approach the felt flutter inside. My father has gone to air and he cautioned me to stay indoors while he was gone. It was a beautiful day and I could not resist stepping outside our doorway. Stopping directly in front of me, Ulita's face lit up as a bored smile invited me to join for a short exchange. At first I hesitated, because I couldn't turn down this rare opportunity to be alone with him. Thinking I could make some excuse to my father when I returned, Lisa explained that his mother had some sweets for an elderly woman in Vidrova who has traveled to Deshrev to visit her daughter. You will enjoy travel to. It won't be long, Melina. You'll enjoy Daddy. I consisted as we walked. He began to describe this woman. She's an ancient. She's an ancient. You will see the full of the story. I'm sure she won't let us leave without telling us one. She used to come all the time to visit her daughter, but she hasn't traveled in a long time. It's an unusual visit. I nodded truthfully. It doesn't matter to me who we're going to visit, as long as we're going to be together. She is known as the Seer of Bridaba. I can use a small laugh. I didn't know she was called that, but we'll find out. The sound of the name made my heart speed up as I stopped walking. She was the woman who my mother often speaks. Secret would bring the memories of my mother. I can't go. I can't go see her, Urita, I mumbled. Why? He said in surprise. I can't explain why. Are you scared when I said she's here? I shook my head. We won't stay long, Melanie. I will have you back home very soon. I love Khaled. But that left my attraction for him, why not? I could not give up on the opportunity to spend time with him. So I smiled and replied, just a short visit then. When we arrived at the destination, I was taken aback to the appearance of the woman who received us. She indeed looked like Asian, but deeply lined cheeks on the forehead. She was short and stout of the spirit. Her spirit definitely outdoor experience of my age. Her eyes were very lively, and she warmly welcomed us. My mother repeated to me many stories she heard from this woman. She had never described her. She mentioned us to sit down as she was handing her a package of sweets his mother has prepared. Rita willingly complied, as I had no choice but to follow. I wanted to leave, yet I also wanted to stay by Judita's side. This was the first chance I also got to know him in an informal way. My family comes a long line in the gem cutter, she began, making the jewelry. My daughter married into a family here, so I come to visit when I can, she chuckles. That's when my Asian feet cooperate. We chatted about one thing and another, and then she got up and went into another room and bought 2 jewels.